have another job, because if you don't want to run a business as well, knife making is going to ruin you. G'day guys, Dom here. So, I was actually planning on doing a video today about this oven here and how it's an alternative to the big oven that I talked about yesterday. But when I started talking about this, it sort of turned into a video about DB blades and our story and how this all started. For those of you who don't know, I've been a full-time knife maker for 6 years now. We've been knife making for probably close to a decade, which is really weird because I'm 23, so 24 nearly. So, you know, that's a significant portion of my life. My entire adult life I've been a knife maker. So I thought it'd be really cool to kind of talk about where this all came from and sort of give snippets of how this all started. I get asked every single day by people about how to be a full-time knife maker, and a lot of them are really young kids who are in the situation I was in 5-6 years ago when they want to be a full-time knife maker. And for those people, you know, if you're a young kid, you're in high school, whatever, and you want to be a full-time knife maker, it's, well, at least from my personal experience, it's one of the best things I've ever done. And it has done a lot of good for me. It's given me purpose, and it's given me something to be proud of myself that I've built all this. But on the flip side, it is very, very difficult. You know what, a lot of these young kids don't seem to realize about how difficult it actually is. I've had friends of mine who try and be full-time knife makers, and it didn't work for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not for everybody. This is a really, really hard business. You'd be hard pressed to think of another harder business because the overheads are nuts, the insurance is nuts, it's very hard to train people, and it's very hard to make a decent amount of money. Realistically, this workshop, we should be making $100 an hour at the minimum. We should really be making $150 an hour. I don't make that, I don't even make close to that, but that's really where we should be. You're running a business, and that's what a lot of the younger people, yes, the teenagers, all that sort of stuff, don't realize is that this is a job and it will absolutely take a lot out of you. At this point, I've seen a whole lot of people try and be full-time knife makers. Most of them don't last a year, even less last 2 years. In Australia, there is a handful of full-time knife makers. There is maybe less than 10. There is definitely less than 10 full-time knife makers. And full-time knife makers that aren't supported by their wife or girlfriend or are independently wealthy or retired or whatever, there's maybe three or four. And one of them, there is very, very few who can actually make a living as a knife maker by themselves without having to needing anything else from anybody else. I'm fully self-sufficient. I don't rely on anybody. I don't get money from anybody. I can make my entire living off knife making, but it is incredibly difficult. You are running a business that is a really, really difficult business, and it's a business that's going to take a lot out of you. I'm in this factory 80 to 100 hours a week, every single week, and it's absolutely taken a toll on my health, it's taken a toll on my relationships, and it's taken a massive chunk of my youth to get to this point. But I've got no regrets. I'm very proud of where I've got to at this point. But that's just sort of as a message to a lot of the people out there who think this is all sunshine and roses. It's not. It's hard, it's brutal, and it's a very difficult way of making a living. It's something that if you're not obsessed about it, and if you don't live and breathe knife making, and you're not prepared to dedicate your life to this craft, or your business, whatever you want to call it, you're not going to get anywhere. There are so many people that failed being a full-time knife maker, it's not even funny. If that's what you want to do, if you just want to make knives and you enjoy making knives, have another job, because if you don't want to run a business as well, knife making is going to ruin you. It just will. But anyway, let's get a little bit more cheerful, all right? Let's go back a little bit to when I actually first started the company. So I started knife making as a business in 2014, I believe, 2014, maybe 13. But that's when I first started knife making as a business. And I've been making knives for a while before then. How I actually found knife making is going to be another video at some point, but I was starting to make knives as a business in 2014, thereabouts. At that point, I was actually in my final year of high school. So for those that don't know, I was born in '96, so that makes me 23, nearly 24 now. But I started it, in high school in 2014, I want to say. I was actually originally selling my knives under Armageddon Blade Works, which is now gone. If you look way back in the day, you'll see a few videos on YouTube of me calling myself Armageddon Blade Works, which is kind of weird. In this unique situation where if you want to, you can go on my YouTube, you can go on my Instagram, my Facebook, whatever. You can scroll the whole way back and you can see posts of me when I was first starting the business, when I was just trying to, make a name for myself. I was 17, I was in my final year of high school, and I was miserable. I hated school. I absolutely hated school. I hated the monotony of it. I hated the routine. I very much hated being told what to do. It pissed me off having to wake up and having to sit and waste my time in a classroom learning shit that I had no interest in. Had to write essays that I was never going to write. Had to learn, complex math problems that I was never going to use. And that just pissed me off. And I don't know what happened, but at some point, something switched in my brain where I just thought, I never want to do this again. I never ever want to have to sit in a classroom. I never want to have to sit in a cubicle. I never have to ever want to be told what to do. I want to have my own freedom. I want to do whatever the hell I want to do. And one day I just sort of sat down and I said, where do I want my life to go? And I sat down and I wrote out a list of what I wanted. And the number one thing on my list said I didn't want a boss and I didn't want to work in a cubicle. That was the first two things on my list. And that sort of led me to realize that I want to be self-employed. And what was I going to do as a self-employed person? I want to do the one thing that I've consistently done throughout my whole life. I want to make knives. And that's when I started Armageddon Blade Works. I started my own Instagram account, I started my YouTube channel, and I started just trying to promote myself out there. Be at school all day. During recess, I'd usually do my homework in the library. Just try and get it done as quickly as possible, get home as quickly as possible, do whatever homework I needed to do, and then just start making knives, start posting stuff to Instagram, Facebook, all that sort of stuff to sort of promote myself, because I sort of had this deadline, when I finished school, I had to be able to go and start making knives and start making money. Now, I didn't quite make that deadline. It took me a really long time to get to the point where I was making decent enough money to be able to pay a wage. It took me a really long time, actually. But that's what I was doing, and I was absolutely obsessed with it. I worked like an absolute fucking maniac. And sometimes I really wish I could still have that passion I did when I was 17. These days I still work like crazy, but there's not the same, there wasn't the same drive there was when I was like 17. It's just gone, because obviously I'm more mature and I understand a little bit more about how things work in the real world. But I was obsessed. I was 17. I was just constantly fixated on making knives. And I was lucky that 3-4 weeks after starting my Instagram and all that sort of stuff, I got my first paying job. So I had an American soldier message me saying he wanted a knife to carry on deployment. And it was one of the happiest moments of my life. It still is one of the happiest moments of my life. The first time somebody said, I like your shit well enough that I will give you my money for it. And that changed my world. So I took on this job to make this hunting knife, this army knife for this dude. And fun fact, this guy still carries that knife, and I still get photos of him, carrying his knife for deployment. It's been 6 years now. It's still working great, which makes me really feel great about how, that I did quality work even back then. But when I took on that job, I didn't have a heat treating oven. I had a grinder, I had the Knifemaker, and I had a drill press, like a $99 drill press, and that was about it. I didn't really know how I was going to make the knife when it came to heat treating it. Before that, I'd basically heat treat my knives in a big bonfire. I'd light a big fire, and then I'd put a sheet of steel over it, and that would make enough heat to sort of get my steel, glowing hot, and I'd stick it in some, motor oil or whatever I had to quench it. And that worked okay, but it wasn't great. Luckily, a few days after that job came in, a friend of the family, not knowing that I was a knife maker, just said, hey, I've got this kiln right here. Do you want it? I want it gone. Now, there's nothing wrong with this kiln. It's a little bit smashed up. It's a bit dirty inside, but it was a perfectly functional kiln. But this is actually how I heat treated my first maybe 200 knives. And it was sort of a moment where, this is going to sound very woo-woo. I'm not a very woo-woo person, but this was sort of an indication from whatever power there is that I'm on the right path, because whenever I needed this kiln, it sort of just dropped in my lap. And I'm eternally grateful that this happened, because it gave me that push, and it gave me that start Armageddon Blade Works back then. So that's what I heat treated my first knife in. And then I started making knives. I started making more and more knives. I started posting for sale and all that sort of stuff. And then the Melbourne Knife Show came up. I was maybe 18 years old, and I went to the Melbourne Knife Show with a bag full of knives. I had my camera with me, and I filmed all the knife makers, did interviews with my knife makers to make a YouTube video about all the knife makers and all that sort of stuff at the show. And that video is still live on YouTube if you want to check it out. But some guy just saw me filming, filming these knives, and he just said, "Hey, what's going on?" And it was a collector, a knife collector, a knife collector who's bought a significant amount of knives and a lot of high dollar knives. And I showed him the knives I had with me, and he just said, "Yeah, these are great, I'll take all of them." So at my very first knife show, I sold, I think about maybe $300-400 worth of knives, cash. And when you're 18 years old and you don't have any other money coming in, that was a godly amount of money for me at that time. It's also very much frowned upon. If you go to a knife show, don't try and sell shit out of your backpack. We don't like it, it's not good. But I didn't know better, And that was sort of where it all started. I was just making knives throughout high school, make a knife, sell a knife, make a knife, sell a knife. And I was just putting my pennies together, trying to save by a 2x72. That was a huge, huge purchase. I didn't quite make it. I didn't get enough money together to buy a 2x72 by the time I left high school. But I got damn close. And I got a little bit of money from my parents, which I as a loan to buy my first grinder. That's how we started. School year ended. I remember my 2x72 came in at the start of my exams. I didn't touch it until my exams were over. And the second I got home from my last exam, I switched on that grinder and I started to work. And that's basically been it. I've worked constantly. My first year as a full-time knife maker was absolutely fucking brutal. I made no money. I worked like a dog. And I didn't really get anywhere. It took me years to get to anywhere. I think my first year of knife making, I made about $12,000 from memory before expenses. I think about $3,000 of that was profit. I was just buying, whatever I needed. I'd work a little bit and, bought whatever I needed. And luckily, I was living with my parents at the time, and that very much subsidized my income. I didn't have to make any money. At some point, I had to start paying rent, and I had to start paying, paying overhead, which is totally fine. But the first year was definitely, I had that advantage where I didn't have to make any money and I could just work and work and work. I had no other responsibilities. And that's probably the reason why we're here today. If I had to pay, if I had a family to support and I had, real responsibilities, I don't know if I'd be here today, because fuck me, it took me a long time to make money. I remember when I made my first $1,000 from knife making, and it was sort of a bittersweet moment because I made $1,000, but then PayPal was like, "No fam," and locked up my account. Fuck me, at 18, 19 years old, on the phone trying to get my money back from PayPal was a fun experience. PayPal will fuck you over in a blink of an eye. So if you're a knife maker, just be really wary of PayPal. They're not your friend. But yeah, that's how we started. And this oven was essentially there for the whole thing. I was heat treating all my knives in this thing. And it was really weird because essentially when I first started, I made exclusively EDC knives. I would exclusively make knives that was like this big. And that's purely because that's all I could fit in my oven. My oven's not very deep here. It's about the size of my hand internally. I could fit maybe a 200mm blade in there if I sort of angled it a little bit, but it was really, we didn't have any room in the oven. And that's how it all sort of started. We sort of made knives. I sort of just made knives and sold them and made knives and sold them and got more and more equipment, And about 3 years in, I started actually making enough money where I sort of had money left over at the end of the month. Not quite. It took me about 4 years until I got to that point where real money was coming in. Money that you could actually realistically run a business on. And I'm at the point now where people actually pay me money to do knife making courses with me, which is something that is sort of surreal, people, paying money, flying from interstate. I've got people coming from across Australia to come and do courses with me. And that's really, really, that's something I'm really proud of. And that brings us to 2020. Now this year has been a roller coaster. The whole world's been having issues with this sort of stuff. I was in Germany 3 weeks ago, nearly 4 weeks ago, and basically as soon as I came back, I had to go straight into self-isolation by law for 2 weeks. And I'm lucky enough that I have a great support system here. So I still had all my packages shipping and all that sort of stuff. I had food brought to me, but I self-isolated my factory. I've got no shower here, so I had to sort of rig up a shower, but I had a moment when I was on the flight back here and things were just going to shit left, right and center, where I just said, I'm not losing my business. I'm not losing my company. And that's sort of where we are now. Luckily, business has picked up. We had a huge drop in business when this all started. When they started going self-isolation and the whole world went into panic, I had a massive drop in business. I had to refund all my classes. And it's picked up again. I actually got a job to supply a dealer in the States, Urban EDC Supply, which was a decent deposit on that, which is nice and that helps. And we've still got money for the pen orders, we've got money for surgeons coming in. So we're still running the company, we're still running strong. We're gonna have a shift, I think, away from courses and that sort of stuff, away from high dollar stuff. This year I really had planned on doing a lot of high dollar, you know, my axes, that sort of stuff, and my folders, that sort of stuff, where I make more money per knife. But the way things are going, you know, the economy is tough, a lot of people going out of work, so we're gonna switch plans. We're gonna go to more budget oriented stuff in the $100, $200 range, where more people can afford it. With this time where things are shifting, I want to put more effort into YouTube content and bring you guys into my world and show you what goes into the knives, and show you where these knives come from, how this all comes to be, and how we're different, how DB blades are something that's not going to go away. Anyway, I think I've talked for enough now. I think my camera's probably screaming hot right now. So yeah, that's the first video. If you want to see more videos like this, sort of behind the scenes stuff, some of our story stuff, let me know. And thanks for watching, I really appreciate it. Have a good one.